Good morning, DHS. Welcome to PIL webinar number 76, Around the Water Cooler, Why is the PR Late? I'm Scott Simpson with the DHS Procurement Innovation Lab, and today I'm joined by my colleagues, Tracy Harriet and Sandra Oliver-Smith.
Hey, good morning.
Today, we are going to take a deep dive into the PB&J process. We will share a step-by-step process to make a proper peanut butter and jelly sandwich.
Scott, we're not talking about the PB&J process. We're talking about the PPBE process. PPBE is the planning, programming, budgeting, and execution process.
We're not talking about peanut butter and jelly sandwiches? Those are my favorite.
No, sorry to say we're not talking about PB&J sandwiches. But we will be sharing how the budget process can influence when our procurement teams receive funded purchase requests and why some PRs arrive late in the fiscal year.
Well, all right, I guess we can talk about that. And you and our audience, if you want, can drop in your favorite type of peanut butter sandwich in the chat. We don't want this webinar to run late. Maybe we should get started now.
Yes. So before we jump into this great topic, let's do a little housekeeping. Please sign in with your full name, component, and DHS email address using the chat pod to prove you attended this webinar and to receive your credit. If you did not type your name, component, and email address in the chat pod when you enter the seminar room, then please go ahead and type that in now. For example, I would write my name, Sandra Oliver Schmidt, comma, MGMT for my component, comma, and then I would put my email in, sandra.schmidt@hq.dhs.gov. Now to give you a quick orientation of the webinar layout. Now in the bottom right corner, we have the chat box. Not only is this where you type your full name, component, and DHS email address for credit, but also if you have questions at any time, please feel free to type them in here. We have dedicated PIL staff monitoring the questions today. Now we don't want to make this a one-way communication where the audience only asks the PIL questions. We encourage all of you to address each other's questions in conversation and to have dialogue that way. Feel free to respond to your colleagues when there's something you want to address. Now we have links in this webinar. The links to are related to today's topic are in the bottom. We do have many files to download. So in the upper right-hand corner, you can download the documents we'll be going over today and access them at any time. You can also bulk download them if you click on the little three buttons, the little three dots in the upper right-hand corner of that downloads box. We also have closed captioning. This is a visible record of the audio of this webinar. We will also have poll questions throughout. In fact, we need to put up 2 poll questions right now to ask all of you what your role is in the procurement process and the number of webinars you have previously attended. Now for our slides today, there is a full screen option if you'd like to make them larger. And the slides box, go to the upper right-hand corner where the 3 dots are, and then you can, or next to the 3 dots, and you can actually make this bigger. It's the little box with the 4 arrows going in all directions. Just click it again if you wish to minimize it. Now moving on to slide number 3, previously on the PIL at the last month's webinar, we asked, can we skip over pricing? And in this webinar, we share tips and resources that can help your teams build better CLIN structures and pricing structures for your procurements. We also shared how to skip over some of the price evaluations using the highest technically rated with a fair and reasonable price innovative procurement technique. A recording of this webinar, as well as all the previous 75 webinars, are available on the PIL's DHS Connect webpage, also available in the links. So Tracy, how about you announce who's here today, and then I'll go over the polls.
Sounds great. I'd be happy to. So with us today, we have Rolf Torgerson from the Office of the Chief Financial Officer. Rolf, are you out there?
I believe my microphone is unmuted, yes.
You are good, sir. Glad to have you. We also have with us Donata Sikanamato from the Office of the Chief Procurement Officer.
Good morning, everybody.
And we'll also be joined by Vincent Mangum from the Office of the Chief Procurement Officer. Vincent, are you out there?
Hi, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Brilliant. Now, in the poll questions we asked, and I have to make these polls bigger, so sorry if we're covering the page, but wanted to know how many PIL webinars have you attended? And it looks like a majority of you out there have attended 2 to 4 webinars. And oh, wow, look at this. 21% of you, this is your first time. So thank you all for being here with us again today. Next, we ask, what is your primary role within the acquisition community? And wow, once again, it looks like a majority of you are from the program manager core side of the house. Over 50% of you. Thank you so much for being here today. And also, thank you, contracting officers and contract specialists, for representing. You're hovering at around 30%. And I am thrilled to see 19 procurement analysts, price analysts, and small business folks here today. Wonderful to have you here with us.
And now it is my pleasure to introduce our tone from the top, the Acting Chief Financial Officer, Ms. Stacy Marcotte.
I am Stacy Marcotte. I'm the Acting Chief Financial Officer for Homeland Security. And thank you very much for having me here today to share a little bit about the DHS and the federal government budget process and kick off this 76th PIL webinar. CFO for the Department of Homeland Security kind of shepherds the entire budget process, but it really starts down in the front lines of the program offices who develop their requirements and estimate the resources that they need for them. Those end up ultimately going to the Office of Management and Budget in the White House to be reviewed and to give us feedback on those different funding levels, basically to make sure that they are in line with the policy decisions of where the administration wants to go, and do any adjustments to make sure any other recent policy decisions are reflected. And then ultimately it goes to Congress to be enacted in an appropriation. Hopefully. We all know that often, and I think I read a GAO report recently, 50 plus times in the last 10-ish years, the federal government has been operating without an appropriation. You might ask, why is this relevant to me as part of the acquisition workforce? But understanding the budget process and where the department is in its appropriations requests and programmatic resourcing requests enables you to understand why oftentimes PRs are a little bit late. PRs are only incrementally funding a contract requirement. And today's webinar is to clarify that budget process, highlight some of the risks some of the risks to the programs and some of the risks to contracting when we have delayed funding. And a lot of what I'm talking about in the continuing resolution and delayed funding is when we can only spend money as a federal government when Congress acts to give us a particular law that enables us to draw money from the Treasury. That's called an appropriation law. So I just wanted to advocate for being flexible, that we've got to be responsive when we've had appropriations come as late as April or May in the fiscal year. That doesn't give us a lot of time, knowing that we were only spending small amounts up until then. My office and the frontline program offices are always being responsive, and we are extremely grateful for the partnership of our contracting officers and contract specialists who proactively engage us in early planning while also helping us find creative flexibilities, testing innovations within the FAR to award those unexpected or previously unplanned contracts, ultimately to support the mission of the department and to enable Homeland Security operations. So I just wanted to say thank you very much for what you do every day. I have faith in your abilities to continue to meet the DHS mission in new and unique ways, and hopefully we get a budget soon. But I will say thank you for your service. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you for making a difference and enabling the DHS mission. And thank you for having me here and letting me kick off the 76th PIL. I'll turn it back over to Scott and Tracy. Thank you and have a great day.
Thank you very much, Stacy. We really appreciate those inspiring words. Let's jump back into today's content around the water cooler. Why is the PR late? Around the water cooler is the standing theme for all of the PIL webinar series in FY24. This is the third webinar in the series, and so far we are receiving overwhelming interest. The webinars featured this year are topics that have been shared by you through both direct and indirect feedback through coaching engagements, boot camps, and particularly from the Competing Values Framework Survey, which we'll be talking about more later. We hope you enjoy this series, and we look forward to seeing you around the water cooler throughout the year.
May I also say, Scott, last month, you all broke a record. We had the most highly attended webinar in the, 9 years we've been around, over 760 attendees. So thank you all so much, and welcome back. Now moving on to slide number 3. The DHS Chief Procurement Officer, Paul Courtney, has 4 strategic priorities for the contracting workforce, and they are listed here as follows. They are to empower the workforce, to energize partnerships through collaboration, inspire innovation to enhance mission outcome, and ultimately to enrich the DHS procurement experience. As you heard from our great tone from the top, today's webinar really hits upon collaboration. But we're also going to hear tips about policies that empower innovations, and of course, how to improve enhance and enrich the DHS procurement experience.
Now, looking back through the PIL webinar archives, it doesn't look like we've had a budget-related topic before, but we did find a few webinars that are related to topics we're going to cover today, like trust, talking to others, and meeting the mission. On slide 5 here, you'll see that each month we are highlighting a section from FAR Part 1. This month's FAR Part 1 phrase of the month is from FAR 1.102-2C, which says that the acquisition team consists of all participants in government acquisition, including not only representatives of the technical, supply, and procurement communities, but also the customers they serve, and the contractors who provide the product and services.
And the contractors, that's amazing, Tracy. Well, to help us walk through this budget process and how it affects our procurement teams, we're going to use 2 personas this month. We're going to follow Anita, a contracting officer, and Steve, who's a PM or a core. Now it's August, when all of a sudden, Anita and Steve get a new requirement to procure drones. Drones, they say. What? Why is this the first time I'm hearing about drones? Well, let's find out. Joining us from the Office of the Chief Financial Officer is Rolf Torgerson. Rolf, good morning, and tell us about yourself.
Good morning. That's right. I'm the formulation team lead for DHS, which means I help all the components coordinate their presentation materials and deliver the deliver the budget to Congress. Excuse me.
I wish you could deliver Congress to the budget. Let's work on that for next year. Now, our theme for today, if it wasn't obvious, is that great game that allows you to purchase properties, houses, and even hotels. We all have a favorite game piece. Rolf, which one are you going to be playing with today?
I'd love to be the dog. Thank you.
All right. Well, let's get started. I'm a dog lover too. Now, before we really dive in and roll the dice, let's talk high level about these 4 phases in the PPBE process. It looks like on slide 8 here, that first phase is pretty early in the game. Rolf, what does the first P stand for?
The first P stands for planning.
And what do you do in the planning phase? High level, one sentence.
Sure, in the planning phase, you're doing strategic looks at what we don't have in our budget yet that we might have to put narrative or funding towards in the future.
Awesome. Okay. Now in that second phase.
Now, I just want to clarify though, I'm seeing the years 2017 to 2019 on here. Which budget year are we actually planning for?
So here in our example today, and you'll see this on all the slides, we're talking about 2024, and we really want to hit home on the fact that this planning happened all the way back in 2017 to 2019 for the 24 cycle.
Oh my.
That was a long time ago.
That's a long time ago. Well, okay. What did it take to get funding here in FY24? Let's keep
All
going.
right. So in that second phase, we've rounded the first corner of the game board. Depending on how far out we are, there could be a lot of game or a little game left. What is that second P for, and what do you do in this phase, Rolf?
Well, we take what we've learned in planning and we come into the programming phase where we develop a 5-year profile and we start to try to quantify our resource requirements for those changes in our budget.
All right. Now, in that third phase, that happens every year. And at the end of this phase, hopefully, is when you get your money. What is the B for?
So the B is for the budgeting phase. We take our 5-year plan and we concentrate on the lowest fiscal year of that plan, and we start to really flesh out our narrative and our justification for that, eventually ending up delivering the president's budget to the public and to Congress.
All right. And then finally, it's E for execution. Is it finally time for me to start buying those houses?
That's right. And actually last night, 2:30 in the morning, if you've been reading the news, they released our 2024 draft budget. And so that's what my team and I have been looking at, as I'm sure a few of the folks on the phone have been looking at this morning, to see what that means. But yes, eventually we get an appropriation, and we'll talk about what that means a little later.
And how long does it take for this, for when the idea was first created until the award of that contract?
Quite a while. So you're looking, again, the planning is happening years in advance. And as a program manager, you should always be thinking about your out-year needs and communicating with your budget shop to make sure that you understand any changes that have happened as you progress in managing your program and funding you might need to plan to in the future.
All right. Thanks, Ralph. Well, let's take a deep dive into the planning phase now. Don't forget, we've got our first poll open. Do you plan your personal budget 7 years in advance? So check out that poll. And now it looks like this first phase can be really long-term. How long-term are we talking about, Ralph?
Again, this is 5 to 7 years out. As a program manager, you would only be really involved in this if you were a subject matter expert. Some of the parlance you might hear on this is like winter studies or summer studies. This is going to be at the policy level that the department or even OMB, the Office of Management and Budget, might say, hey, we need some input. We think we might need to do something in the future in this particular strategic topic. And you're starting to flesh out what that means.
All right. So it sounds like this starts at 2024 now. I got to count backwards. It looks like that started back in 2017 to 2019 or so. That's a long time to plan for what we think is going to hit this year. Who comes up with those big ideas?
Sometimes the Office of Management and Budget comes up with those ideas. Sometimes they're self-identified by the Department of Homeland Security. But this is where ideas are fleshed out. For instance, right now we might start talking about artificial intelligence and how that might affect things. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as an example later.
And who drives this budget process? Is that at the headquarters level? Is it from the component level? Who's driving that?
This would mostly be at the headquarters level on down, and they would go into applicable components to ask for inputs or subject matter experts. But for the most part, for program managers, this is not something you would have to be concerned with.
Now, I see we've got a deliverable here at the end, the resource planning guide. What is that deliverable?
So all of this is done before we're trying to assign numbers or funding numbers to these items. We might come up with rough order of magnitudes, but we're not being specific yet. And so what we do is this informs the resource planning guidance, which then helps in defining our control numbers for the next phase of the cycle, which we're going to go into.
Okay. Now, you also mentioned we've got this Office of Management and Budget, OMB. Do they have a role here?
Yeah, we're in constant communication with OMB. As I mentioned before, they can possibly be driving some of these discussions, these winter studies, and these policy initiatives.
All right. Well, let's talk in terms that we can follow along for our personas. We're going to follow 3 needs here. The first need is from the U.S. Coast Guard. We love the Coast Guard. And I know for a few years now they've been looking for a new icebreaker, even though we've got a cutter on the picture there. That's need number 1 that we've identified. Need number 2, drones for FEMA to use after natural disasters. And need number 3 here is cybersecurity services to prevent hackers from getting into our enterprise. Well, let's follow that along and ask, what are our 2 personas here? Steve, the PM core, and Anita, our CO. What are they doing in this phase? Or is it too early for them to be worried about the budget 7 years down the road in FY24?
It is probably too early for a CO, a PM, or a core to be that engaged in this process.
All right. Are you putting dollars and numbers to these ideas yet, or is it too early for that too?
Definitely too early for their level of fidelity.
All right. Sandra, let's go over our poll now. We asked people, do you plan your personal budget 7 years in advance? What'd they say?
Yeah, I'm curious myself. So a majority of you, 60%, no, I don't plan 5 to 7 years in advance, but maybe just for big items. You know, that makes sense, like a house, you know, or like a really fancy car. I could see that.
Or maybe later on we're going to hear about college.
Oh, gosh.
That's a big one.
Yeah.
All right.
After that, it's 24% say it depends. 11% say definitely not. I got to tell you, we have a 7% contingent in here who says yes for everything, even 5 to 7 years out. You know what? Good on you.
All right. Keep looking out there for those polls, and let's move to the next slide, number 11. All right. We're into the next phase now, programming. It looks like this phase starts, quite a while ago too. For our current budget cycle that started way back in 2018. What's going on during the planning phase or the programming phase, Rolf?
So in the programming, we're trying to start to assign funding values in a 5-year funding profile. So for instance, back in when we're looking at 2024, this could have been anywhere in 2018 to 2022. We're looking at that 5-year funding profile. So as a program manager, you might know your budget this year, but what do you need next year? Or is there a funding bump that you will need in the budget year plus 1 or 2? So this tries to capture that.
And I see that we've got our first deliverable here, the RAP, the Resource Allocation Plan. Who's drafting that and what is it?
Sure. So the Resource Allocation Plan is drafted by the individual DHS, the 15 individual DHS components. And it's the components version of the budget in that 5-year funding profile that they submit to DHS PA&E, or Program Analysis and Evaluation, to say this is what we need in the next 5 years in all the movement. And then PA&E takes that RAP and they analyze it. And they also have some things that might have been informed, for instance, by secretary priorities or by the planning process. You might hear the term issue teams, and you yourself as program managers might be part of an issue team. For instance, AI is in the 26 cycle that's about to start. Artificial intelligence is going to be a topic that there is an issue team on. So if you have equities in that, you might represent your component as participating in an issue team for really defining what is the resource need that your component needs to effectively address that topic.
And I know AI is going to be hot. It's going to impact all of us. So look for that to impact every component. Now I see we've got another deliverable here, the RAD, the Resource Allocation Decision, which y'all have great names for these things. The RAP, the RAD, these are great. You're making budget fun today, Rolf. What is this RAD?
So the component submits the RAP, PA&E evaluates it and analyzes it. And in addition, they're running these issue teams, and they come out with a final funding profile that's been approved by the secretary and by all the components themselves, the leadership of the components. And that is called the RAD, and it is a snapshot. The resource allocation decision usually comes in late July. It is a snapshot of our funding profile that's been approved by the secretary that then informs the next step in the budget process.
All right. Well, let's check out our poll results a little early here. We asked people, have you ever participated in creating your office's budget? Sandra, what do people say?
Let's see. It looks like, we're gonna keep in mind, we do have a majority of program managers and cores in here today. So it looks like most of you, over 30% of you, yeah, you've been part of the budget formulation in your office. You know what? That's pretty high, higher than I thought.
It is higher.
Yeah. After that, at 40%, which is now the majority, most of us know never. And then followed by that, yeah, some folks have touched it, just a little under 20%, but it was at a former office.
All right. Well, if you haven't budgeted with the government, maybe tell us about something that you're budgeting for right now. I know that I've got one girl who's, oh my goodness, she's turning 11 tomorrow, and I am in the middle of budgeting for college for her. And so if you've got something big like that you're saving for, why don't tell us in the chat what you're budgeting for. All right, so in our example here, DHS leadership has come back with the RAD, and they've said they're not going to fund that new Coast Guard icebreaker for now, but they are going to look at the drones because there's a lot of cross-agency need for drones and a lot of cross-agency needs for cybersecurity. AI, anybody? So we're going to keep those in our mind here. Let's go back to Anita and Steve, our most excellent CO and COR. Is there anything that they need to do right now to get ready to obligate money in FY24, Rolf?
During the RAD, no, but they need to constantly have a good relationship with their budget shop so that they can be having a discussion when changes occur to a component's budget profile. What does that mean for their program? So it's very important that they keep a good communication with their budget shop and establish that relationship so that any stage in the game they can talk to them and say, okay, what's going on? And for instance, if we were talking now, what's going on in 2026? What could I expect in 2027? And how does that affect my program?
Awesome. All right. Okay. So we're getting really close to the appropriation now. This is the budget phase, and it happens every year. Looks like the first step here is talking with OMB, that Office of Management and Budget. What does that look like?
So when the RAD is issued, we take the lowest fiscal year of the RAD, which the next one we'll be working on is fiscal year 2026, and we single out that one fiscal year, and we start to build a defensible narrative to that. So we're putting words, we're justifying it, we're saying how it's going to affect the performance and why it's so important to our component's mission. And we take that, we aggregate it all, it goes through a review process through leadership, and it's about 4,000 pages, a little more than that when it's all said and done. And we send it over to OMB in early September.
Okay. Now, we've got this clock here that comes up. It says 72 hours. What do you do during these 72 hours?
Well, right. And so there's the most hated exercise we have of our fiscal year is called passback. And right after Thanksgiving, OMB has been spending 2 or 3 months reviewing all of those documents that we sent to them. And they say, okay, hey, DHS, that's nice. This is what we think of your budget. And that's called passback. And we have 72 hours to review that document of what they think of our budget and say, no, OMB, we think you're wrong. We really need this program. And so we submit appeals to OMB. And it is, unfortunately, it is a very quick turnaround, very hectic 72 hours. And once we get out of that, then we know our fiscal controls to inform the next step in our process, which is drafting or finalizing the congressional justification.
That sounds like a really hectic time, Rolf. And I'm sure that COs can appreciate that when they're given a modification or whatever else to do in 3 days. Sandra, I've been seeing a lot of good things in the chat. What's something interesting that people are saving for?
Well, folks are saving, they're taking about 5 or so years to save for retirement. I've seen some pretty fancy vacations. I've seen for buying a house. Some have some big house renovations coming up. So, initially I thought 5 to 7 years is way too far out to be budgeting, but, maybe not. If we're doing it in our personal lives, maybe it's just as well the government does that too.
I really liked the Hawaii vacation. I'm going to jump in and start saving for that, I think. That's my favorite. All right, so after this OMB passback, where we've got to justify it, now it looks like we give our budget to the president. Is that actually what becomes the president's budget? He doesn't write it himself?
Right, so that OMB justification was our draft, right? And so we revisit what we already submitted, and we clean it up. We take OMB's our appeals and OMB's direction, and we basically make a new version of that budget, goes through a lot of review and ends up getting released. And as a matter of fact, the president's budget for DHS or the whole president's budget for the whole federal government was released on March 11th of this year. That is the fiscal year 2025 budget. All
right. Now, just briefly, I know that when we submit our budget or when the president submits it, there's also this congressional justification. What is the congressional justification?
The congressional justification is that narrative. The fourth, this last year, it was about 4,400 pages of narrative that defines our resource requirement for fiscal year 2025.
All right, perfect. All right, let's go into the next slide. We're on slide 14 now. The budget requests are with the House and the Senate now, and they provide this report, the House Appropriation Committee report and the Senate Appropriation Committee report, which again, you're continuing the great name trend. It's called the SAC and Hack. What are these Hack and SAC reports?
So, right. The House Congress reviews our budget, and then they weigh in and they draft bills to tell us what they think of it. And the House drafts a bill and the Senate drafts a bill. And in these reports, there is further information that might be very pertinent to a program manager. There could be program-specific information that they call out. Something that's in one of the things we're going to talk about in a second for CBP is like integrated surveillance towers. Might actually specifically be called out in the House or the Senate report, and they could be different, right? The House might want something, and the Senate might not care as much about it, might not even mention it, but the Senate might mention something else. But as a program manager, this is where that relationship with your budget office becomes so important, because you can say, hey, I heard that the House draft bill, I saw a press release that the House draft bill was released. What does that mean for my program? And you'll be able to find out if there's anything called out specifically for your programs in these reports.
All right, so we've got these Hack and SAC reports, and they might say different things. The House might say yes to something, and the Senate says no. So what happens when you're doing the component spend plans for these? How do they come up with those numbers?
So your budget shop has kind of a hard needle to thread. At some point in the late August, early September, in preparation for the October 1st fiscal year, they have to choose numbers and how you will build a spend plan, right? How you will execute funds. They don't necessarily know what numbers you're going to get, but it's kind of an educated guess. And so what happens then is in that August, September timeframe, you're building spend plans. This is literally every single PR that you're going to execute. Right? Is it going to be an IAA? Is it going to be a firm fixed price? Is it going to be time and materials? To have an idea of how you will execute that, so that in the new fiscal year, you will be ready to go.
All right. And then finally, we get the appropriations. And it looks like the appropriation comes with this joint explanatory statement. Real briefly, what is that JES?
So the JES is very similar to the Hack and SAC reports, but this is now both the House and Senate coming together. So for instance, you might have a briefing that was specified in the House report but not in the Senate, and let's say you had your budget shop said, hey, we really don't want this briefing. They could be communicating with both committees so that they get that removed. That would be in the joint explanatory statement. It would have to be spelled out there. In addition, there might be further call outs. This is where all the earmarks are, et cetera, in the bill itself. The details of all this can be found in the joint explanatory statement.
All right. Well, it seems like we've had a lot of justifications here. We got the president's budget, we've got the CJ, we've got the Hack and SAC. Oh my goodness, so much to justify. Let's ask the audience here. Think back to when you were young, maybe a teen or living with parents or guardians. Did you ever have to justify something that you really wanted to buy, or that you really wanted them to buy for you? Sandra, do you have an example?
Of course I do. So I was 10 and I really wanted a cat. And I had to negotiate with my parents for almost a year. And we finally settled on how I would use my weekly allowance to buy the cat food, and I would use my birthday money to get her spayed.
Wow.
And little did I know, I guess I was always meant to be a contracting officer. I don't know. But
did you get the cat?
I did get the cat.
There
she was
you
a
go.
black cat. Her name was Cindy, and she lived 16 years.
Wow. Nice investment. I see there's a lot of other people out here. Mary says, yeah, they had to convince her parents to help co-sign for her first car.
Oh, that's a big deal.
I was there for that.
Yeah.
What else did you all have to tell us in the chat? What you had?
I had new basketball shoes. I like that one.
Very nice. All right. Now, as they drop those into the chat, we're going to keep rolling here onto slide 15. And I think you know what my next question is going to be, Rolf, is what are Anita, the CO, and Steve, the PM, doing during this budget phase? It sounds like they could be really busy.
Right. You can start building the shells and all the supporting documentation for your PR. As soon as you have what your budget says, hey, this is going to be your expected program funding, and we want you to build a spend plan for that. You can start building the shell and reviewing those materials of a PR package.
All right. So is this also, I mean, before they start building those documents, is this also where they're starting market research and talking to industry?
Absolutely.
All right. So early coordination here between the CEO, the COO, or the PM. Definitely get industry involved. That way you've got the process started. This is great to know. All right. So we've got the House and the Senate. They've passed their appropriations bill. This is where our first theme comes back, and I want to sing here. I'm just a bill. Oh, no singing today.
No singing
Sorry.
today.
All right. So
Yeah.
we've got the House and the Senate. They've passed their bill. The president has signed it. After that, who starts to distribute the money down to the components and to the agencies, Rolf?
Right. When an appropriations bill is passed, we have a 30-day apportionment. That's automatic, so the government doesn't shut down. But in the meantime, your budgeting shops and your accounting shops will be working furiously to get that money, get the authority to load that money into your accounting system in what's called an apportionment. That's approved by the Office of Management and Budget, or OMB. And then once they get the authority to load a certain amount of money, then they will load it into your accounting system all the way down to your original line of accounting so that you can execute it on a PR that's already ready and waiting to go.
Yeah, can I just say, this explains why I have never seen a PR in October, even when there is a budget on time.
Yeah.
I didn't realize how much was going on in your budget office, Rolf, just to get a PR, to where our programs can even create PRs. I personally find this really helpful.
It's a long process, right? It's got to go all through this, down to OMB, down to DHS, down to the components, down to the agencies, and then finally loaded into my account. Like, that's a lot just to go through, just to get there. And that's if the process works the way it's supposed to work.
And all this, so essentially, by the time we get a PR, it's basically an adult.
Yeah.
It started out as a baby 7 years ago, and now it's an adult. I had no idea.
Maybe in cat years, right? All right. Well, this is how it's supposed to work, Rolf. But what happens when Congress doesn't pass that budget by September 30th?
So anybody who's been in government for any amount of time is familiar with the term continuing resolution. A continuing resolution, when Congress fails to meet its necessity of passing a new budget, they pass a continuing resolution, which funds the government at the same level as the previous fiscal year. However, you cannot start any new projects for Coast Guard, for example, that needs to build new boats or new ships. This can be a really hampering activity because they can't do anything new. They can only continue what they've done in previous years. And because a lot of times continuing resolutions are date driven, so like this year I believe we had a continuing resolution maybe from October 1st to December 15th. This is why the spend plans become so important, because in that spend plan you'll say, hey, this is how much money I need and when I need it. So to be able to communicate that to your budget shop, because we probably will have a restricted funding environment, to really know what you need to keep that contract going to a certain date, and hopefully we'll get a full enactment later, becomes very important.
Sounds like this is also a time when if you're without a budget, that there needs to be a lot of engagement back and forth between the CO, the COR, the PM, so that everyone's on the same page and can really be fascinated by things. Well, this has been great, Rolf. I really appreciate all the information. Do you have a final thought for the audience today?
No, just that you should all be talking to your budget shops, maybe not today, maybe tomorrow once they've digested it. They should be able to give you an analysis of what the 2024 enacted means, and you should be able to come to a kumbaya on what that means for your program in 2024.
Well, thanks very much, Rolf. Fingers crossed. These are the last 2 days of our CR, and you'll get us a budget on Monday. Thanks very much. We'll let you get back to the good work.
All right. Hey, I just rolled the dice, and my game piece just landed on one of those little question mark spaces, and I get to read the orange card. It says that the annual procurement culture survey is about to be released on April 9th. Now, this annual survey is an opportunity for all the contracting professionals out there, the program office customers, the cores, the procurement analysts, and the attorney advisors to provide their perception of the culture of the procurement offices at each DHS component. Now, this annual survey is hosted by the DHS Chief Procurement Officer, Paul Courtney, and the results are used by senior leaders to improve the DHS procurement experience, one of the Chief Procurement Officer's strategic priorities. So taking this survey is just as important as taking the FEV survey. And special announcement to all you folks who were able to join us today during the webinar, you will receive in the chat a link to the survey. That's right, you can take the survey early. So go ahead and click on that survey. Don't take it. We still have really good topics to cover in the webinar, but it'll be holding there for you in your internet search engine there, and you'll be able to take it weeks before anyone else at DHS gets to take it. So we really look forward to hearing from you and of all the things that we can do to help improve the DHS procurement experience. So Tracy, over to you.
Sandra, thanks so much for filling us in on the upcoming procurement culture survey season. I actually didn't know that we were going to have an advanced link for folks. That's super exciting that they'll have a chance to take that survey early. So now we're going to get back to our regularly scheduled program. So we heard from Rolf and Scott about the federal budgeting process and what that means for the OCFO's office. Now I'd like for us to break that down a little closer to home. Our next guest works within the Office of the Chief Procurement Officer. His team supports teams like ours here at the PIL for our budgetary needs, as we're also a program office and sometimes even we need contracts. For those of you in other parts of DHS, your team has a budget office that supports you too. I'd like to introduce Vincent Mangum. Vincent, please say hello and tell us a little bit about yourself and your role in OCPO.
Thanks, Tracy, and good morning to everyone. I am the lead budget formulation, execution, and human capital person for the Office of the Chief Procurement Officer. It's a pleasure to be with you all today.
Thanks so much for joining us. So we've already learned a lot about the PPBE process. Now, Vincent, you had shared with me a really great analogy about how the PPBE process exists in our everyday lives. And we touched on that a little bit as well in our chat box earlier. So I was hoping that you and I might be able to share that story you shared with me with our audience today to help them understand this process.
Thanks, Tracy. I'm not going to regurgitate everything that was just mentioned previously, but try to break it down to language that we can all understand, as the PPBE process is really something that we engage in every day in our life. The example that I had in terms of life goals is taking a look at a couple, someone who has been dating for quite some time. Perhaps they started in high school, perhaps they met in college. And as they start to get more serious about their relationship, they start planning for their future. They start thinking long range. They might start thinking about marriage. They might start thinking about kids. And so in this part of our life goal phase, we are now taking a look at the future, even as far as 7 years into the future, to say, hey, I need to start planning for this certain event now if I want to do that 7 years from now. And that's what the planning phase does. It just takes a look at our own personal strategic priorities, takes a look at where we think our needs and our mission are going to be 7 years from now, and we start planning for that.
Okay, I'm with you so far. So I see here on the screen, we have this nice couple, looks like maybe 5 to 7 years ago in the planning phase. What now happens when we get into that programming phase?
So now they want to start taking their plans and really putting some meat to it. They really want to add some substance so that they can have savings accounts, they can take a look at their finances, take a look at perhaps even career moves, because they want to program for those actual life events. What is our wedding going to look like? What kind of home do we want? Do we want a 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom, 4-bedroom? Where might we be in terms of needing a new vehicle at that time? And of course, they might start planning for their children. They might start a start savings account for college tuition for their children. So the programming phase really takes what we started planning and starts to put meat to it, so that when it comes time to actually be where we want to be, we'll have the money for it.
All right. So let's follow the journey of our couple. So let's say they've now gotten married, and in their planning and programming phases, they've decided that they they're going to adopt a teenager, but they really have to start saving for college. So talk to me about that in the budgeting phase.
Just like Rolf mentioned earlier, the programming phase really covers a time frame of about 5 years. But now here we are at the budget phase, and we're really talking about the closest year to us, right? The money that we've programmed, we really want to put together that operating plan and that spend plan. So our teenager is in their senior year, they're getting ready to graduate. We had planned and programmed for them to go to a top 10 tier Ivy League school, right? So the budget now puts into place how much are we going to need for tuition? How much are we going to need for books and other fees? What's going to be the lodging plan and the meal plan in order to meet our plan and the programming to send our child off to college?
Okay, it's been a number of years since I had to worry about college expenses, but you've just brought up some memories for me that I won't talk about right now, Vincent. So we're going to move on. So talk to us about execution.
Definitely. So, we started this process quite some time ago. For some in the group, when you're talking about life goals, you might have started the process 18 years ago. For others, they may have just started the process about 5 to 7 years ago. But here we are. Everything that we've planned, we've programmed, and we budgeted, it's now time to take those funds and use them or execute them, if you will. But like everything in life, plans are just plans, and plans are subject to change. And so in this particular life goal scenario, we had planned for our child to go to an Ivy League school, but our child comes to us and says, hey, that's really not for me. I want to stay closer to home. I want to go to a fine arts school. And come to find out, it's not going to cost as much as we had budgeted for. So in that year of execution, instead of needing $100,000 for college, maybe we only need $25,000. So now we have additional funds available that we can reprioritize or reprogram to perhaps buy our retirement boat or do that kitchen remodel or even do some travel that we had been putting off for quite some time. Other scenarios could be our child got a scholarship that we weren't planning for, and therefore we don't need as much as the budget that we had planned and programmed for. Therefore, those funds kind of fall out, if you will, become available for us to use in other areas.
Oh, wow. It's always nice to have some money left over that can be put back into your pocket. So I'm curious, for folks on the line, let's drop in the chat. What would you do with these extra funds? Vincent, I'm curious, what would you spend the extra money on?
Wow, I think at this point, I probably would want a couple of jet skis or, I've always wanted to dabble a little bit in Bitcoin. Maybe I'll just buy some Bitcoin and see what goes from there.
I love it. Sandra, how about you?
Well, actually, I want to point to the chat. The folks are already answering, which I absolutely love. This means that this PBE process is more relatable than I realized. I have some folks, saving for a bathroom renovation, been there. Home improvements, vacation, new car, travel, retirement. Yeah, I'd love to hear from folks other things that you're saving for. But me, if there was leftover money, I would send my dogs to the doggy day spa, and then maybe if there's any leftover from that, I would take myself to the spa. So yeah, that's what I would do.
I love that. I love that. Maybe we'll get some yellow bananas out there with our extra money.
Yeah, we gotta help Chuck out with this.
All right. Vincent, so I really appreciate you walking through this example with us. I'm sure this might resonate with others, but I never really thought about how the federal budgeting process kind of looks like my own process. Maybe not as structured sometimes, but that's all right. All right, so now what I'd like to do is go back to that work-related PPBE process and jump ahead into the execution phase. But before we do that, looks like we've got a poll to look at some results.
So we asked, do you know who your budget rep is? And wow, it looks like 60%, 150 plus people say, yes, I work closely with them, followed by no, but I know who I would ask. And then a couple of people say, nope, definitely not. And a few people say, yes, but I've never worked with them. So.
All right. So if we're on, moving on to slide number 21. So now that I think about it, so here we are, we're in the execution phase. But Vincent, were you even here at DHS 5 to 7 years ago when the planning process took place for this fiscal year?
Tracy, I sure was, and I was with DOD at the time.
All right. I mean, actually, even if I think about it, our PIL director, Katie Crompton, she wasn't here either when this process took place in terms of what the PIL might be looking for in terms of things we might need to buy to support our office this year. So sounds like something to keep in mind about the process overall, that stakeholders might change along the way. So you're implementing a budget that started before you did. So does this complicate the process for you?
Not really, Tracy. Even when key stakeholders don't change, world requirements do. For instance, when I was with the Department of Defense, we had planned and programmed for a budget 5 to 7 years in advance based on our war on terror in Afghanistan and Iraq and other areas of the Middle East. But as everyone knows, a few years ago, we had a rapid pullout of Afghanistan, which changed how we executed our funds because it was different than the way that we planned. I think everyone's also familiar with COVID and how COVID changed our complete landscape in terms of no one planned for that. No one budgeted for that. All the extra hand sanitizer, all the extra masks, going into a remote posture, folks that had desktops now requiring laptops. So there's many situations that even though key stakeholders don't change, world requirements do.
That makes sense. So I'm looking here at the picture of our cybersecurity request, and it doesn't look the same for 2024 as it did back in 2019. So we have newer threats to consider, like the use of artificial intelligence or AI, for example. So from a budgeting perspective, now what?
You know, it might look different than the initial programming, and IT is one of those areas where you can expect it to happen because technologies are always emerging in the field of information technology and cybersecurity. But we still have to work within congressional authority. But yes, for FY24, we're looking at current cybersecurity trends and needs, which, like most technologies, look differently than they did when we started this process.
All right, so we're getting back to Anita and Steve here on slide number 22. So here they are in August. Steve's really excited his drones were able to get funded. Anita's really happy to help, but she's confused on why this didn't appear until August. So the PPBE process seems pretty straightforward. So how did we end up here?
Well, unfunded requirements are really often identified as part of the PBBE process. When you're in the programming phase, everyone takes all the requirements that they planned for and start putting dollar values to it. But then they may realize that the money that they have to program within is less than their requirements. So they have to prioritize what gets funded first. And then those items kind of slide to a pool that are known as UFERs or unfunded requirements. So it's not that they weren't planned. It's just that at the time that programming took place, we couldn't assign funds to them because other priorities were more important.
Oh, you know, you're right. If I think back, the drones were on the list of priorities. They just hadn't been funded at the time. So, but now they are being funded. So I think we're going to have to talk through this a bit and find out how that happened. So on slide 23, let's talk about some reasons why PRs might appear in fourth quarter. Given DHS's diverse and challenging mission, I would think not all requirements are planned out through the years-long PPBE process. So where do these unplanned requirements come from?
So there are times in which UFERs are not identified as part of the programming phase, but they become a unfunded requirement when the president has a new initiative or the secretary might identify a new need to support the department's mission. For instance, there's a lot of activity within CBP along the border. 5 to 7 years ago, didn't realize we were going to have this situation, but now, based on the president's initiatives, we're having to reprogram and these UFERs are starting to appear throughout the agency.
Okay, got it. Thanks. So new requirements can pop up any time of year, but I did want to acknowledge that there is a method for getting these new requirements or unplanned requirements into the execution phase of the budgeting process. And that's just another reason our PR might not come to fruition until late in the year. All right, we're back with our drones. So now we have already learned these were not an unplanned requirement, but we still need to find out how they ended up funded in August. So Vincent, I see here something called reprogramming. What is that?
Yes, Tracy. So reprogramming at the program office level is just simply taking the funds that were slated for something else and reprioritizing to move those funds or reprogram those funds for a different effort. It could be the result of the original effort coming in less expensive than what was planned or programmed, so funds are available to go to a different effort. It could also be that the effort can't be executed that fiscal year. It might have to slide to another fiscal year, or as we mentioned before, we may have to reprogram as a result in a shift of presidential priorities.
Okay, and I see here another example that maybe we didn't get everybody onboarded like we thought we might want to and have some extra salary funds that we have to move over, and now we might have money for drones.
That's
So I
absolutely
also
correct.
see,
You know, we have to, that's absolutely correct.
go on.
Yeah, I had that happen. I had plans to go on a trip one year, but I had a leak in my ceiling and I had to put all that money towards a new bathroom. So I can totally relate.
Oh boy. So Vincent, we did have a question here in the chat. So how does does that affect the funding for next year if we reprogram funding this year?
You know, that's an excellent question. More often than not, it does not. However, if the item that's not being funded this year is going to slide to next year, then yes, during the resource allocation process, those requirements will have to be identified. And along with every other requirement that's required for that year, it could result in a need for additional funds to do both the items that are required for that fiscal year and the prior year item that wasn't executed.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Tamika, for that question. So Vincent, I see there's a piggy bank here. Does DHS have a piggy bank that I don't know about?
Well, at every level of government, usually there's a reserve that's kind of held back. And this is something that it's not a requirement by law. It's just more of a strategy of financial offices to just have a little money tucked back in the event of an emergency, in the event that a requirement may come in at a higher cost, and some additional funds might be necessary. So we've done that in the past ourselves at the CPO level on a small scale. The management directorate has done it as well, although this year there is no piggy bank.
All right. And I see here too that we may have saved money on a different procurement that allows us to have some money as well. So this
Absolutely.
is
It happens all the time.
All right, so this is starting to click, I think. So our drones did not end up being funded, but now that it's getting later in the fiscal year, we've got some funds available from one of the myriad of ways we've talked about to support this effort now. So maybe our cybersecurity services team saved a bunch of money on their original planned effort. Because they save money, they can now spend those cost savings on the drones. So Vincent, I was wondering if you could help me share with our audience things that Anita and Steve could have done differently, or what our audience members can do differently on their own requirements. Do you have any tips?
You know, I think the biggest tip is just communication. Communicate early and communicate often. When the program office understands that they have a requirement that's not currently funded, it doesn't mean that you don't have to take any action. You can continue to work with your CO to start doing some market research or pre-solicitation activities because you might have a high degree of confidence that money could become available later in the fourth quarter. And when it does, you want to have your requirement and your PR ready to go to execute when that happens.
All right, that's great. So we see here now, Anita and Steve started communicating before the start of the fiscal year. Anita now understands that Steve's team has a cybersecurity requirement that's fully planned to be funded this year. But Steve also let Anita know his team has a requirement for drones they'd really like to award, but they're just on the wish list for now. So speaking of early engagement, Vincent, can you tell me a little bit about how early engagement helps teams when there might be some reserve or reprogrammed funds available?
You know, an unfunded requirement usually just isn't limited to just one or two requirements. There are usually several requirements that can happen within a program office that require additional funds. And those folks that communicate early and have their packages together and ready to go when funding is available are usually those packages that get funded, even though it might be a lower priority, because all the work has been done and pre-socialized with the contracting team and the packet is ready to go and we don't want to lose it, it could, get easier to fund because of that early engagement.
All right, so there's a poll question up about this, but what I'm hearing you say is it's important for acquisition teams to engage early, even if it's on the wish list requirements, because you might start looking for wish list requirements to fund in the third and fourth quarter. And those teams that have engaged and had meaningful discussions early might find themselves in a better position to get funding. So no engagement might end up meaning no new drones for this team. Scott, what do our poll results look like?
All right. Well, we asked folks on your team, the engagement between the CO and the PM occurs, and select all that apply. So it looks like, wow, looks like 33% said during the first 2 months of the fiscal year. Good time to start talking. 25% or so say prior to the fiscal year, even better time. 28% say monthly. Wow, it's up to 30% now. And there's only a few, maybe 25% that say when I receive a funded PR, you got a Q down there that says I'm not a CO, a PM, or a core. So
Yeah.
Great communication out there, I think.
The ones though who wait until there's a funded PR, there's still time to start that engagement early. I think Anita, the contract officer, also appreciate knowing not just the firm requirements coming, but what's the wish list? Because you know what? I mean, even all of us, like we talked about earlier with that example, I had money left over after the doggy day spot. I already knew what I wanted to do if there was money, and I was planning ahead, right? But I think Anita, the contracting officer, might like to know just in case what might come in that fourth quarter of the fiscal year. Know it earlier. Very well done.
All right, so on slide 27 here, so we've heard from two experts so far today on how the budgeting process works, why some requirements are not funded until late in the fiscal year. So here we are again with Anita in August. We now have a better understanding of how a PR might end up being funded late, although somehow we are still able, late in quotation marks,
late.
but somehow we are still able to successfully award by the end of the fiscal year. So stay tuned for our next guest to hear more about how your team can use the flexibilities within regulation to help award when the PR is running late. Vincent, before we go, do you have any final thoughts you'd like to share?
I just want to thank everyone for allowing me to participate and just kind of send a few reminders. We deal with ONS funding, which is 1-year funding, which means it's only available for us to use between the dates of 1 October and 30 September. So that might answer some of the questions as to, well, why do we need to get this done now? And the answer is, well, we can't do it after September 30th because according to congressional law, the money is no longer available for us to use. But just a final reminder and recap that, last minute PRs in the fourth quarter isn't necessarily the result of not properly planning. It's just oftentimes the result of money becoming available that was slated for other things.
Oh boy. All right, Vincent. So thanks for joining us.
Microsoft service outage. I didn't know if I was cut off or not.
No, all good. All good.
All right, so thanks for joining us today and helping us better understand the budgeting process and how teams can help prepare themselves to stay ahead of any of those quote unquote late PRs.
Thank you so much, Tracy.
Before I move on to Sandra and our next guest, I'd like to highlight one story for our listeners today. It doesn't have to be August for a PR to be late. The FEMA Program Support and Workforce Development requirement highlights a story of how an acquisition team worked together to quickly award a $21 million blanket purchase agreement to ensure continuity of services. The PR was late, funded in May, but the team needed to award by August. The CO decided to do things differently this time around to help the acquisition team award on time. And during PILcast 43, she discusses how she changed her mindset on how she was going to engage with the program office to get to PR to award in 3 months. In addition to PILcast 43, this story can also be found in the FY23 PIL yearbook. Both the PILcast and the yearbook are linked here on the slide. This FEMA story was also featured in the PIN in January of this year. Haven't heard of the PIN? You're in luck. Scott's about to tell you all about it.
I am. The Procurement Innovation Neighborhood, or the PIN. The PIN was launched this past December in response to feedback from all of you, the DHS acquisition workforce. The PIN is an informal, monthly, 1-hour COI gathering featuring informal how-to conversations about specific techniques and very recent policy and protest decisions related to innovating the procurement process and enhancing the DHS procurement experience. Previous guests have included a team from FEMA talking about their use of jam sessions to draft evaluation factors, a team from ICE who shared how they use a Microsoft form to seek information from industry in an RFI and walked us through how to set up such a form, as well as discussions on recent GAO protests and policy updates. To be added to the monthly calendar invite for the PIN, simply go to our PIL DHS Connect page and click on the PIN icon to send us an email at pil@hq.dhs.gov and request to be added to the calendar invite. We meet the second Wednesday of every month on Microsoft Teams from 11:30 to 12:30 Eastern. Bring your lunch and hey, bring a friend. Over to you, Sandra.
All right, well, we're moving on to slide number 30. We're going to enjoy some free parking here for just a moment, and we're going to do a real quick review of what we've learned so far before welcoming our final guest. So if you could just enter your answer in the chat. The question for number 1 is, the program planning budget execution PPBE process takes 5 to 7 years. Is it A, true, or is it B, false?
It's a lot of A's out there,
I'm
Sandra.
seeing a lot of A's. I think let's go on and reveal that answer. Yep, it is true. Good job, everyone. Well done. Question number 2. All right. PR packages received during the 4th quarter of the fiscal year should not be processed because they are late and are not important to the DHS mission. Oof. What is you know what?
There's a lot of consensus on B.
A lot of B's. Okay, well, let's reveal what the answer is. Okay, B, false. Well done, everyone. I appreciate that everyone has been in our PPBE journey today and not too distracted while eating their peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. All right, last review question. Number 3, according to regulations, a CO always needs a funded PR to release a solicitation.
There's a lot of B's out there, Sandra.
I'm seeing a few A's, though.
There are some A's.
I'm not sure we have full consensus on this one. Scott, go ahead and reveal that answer, please. It is false. Yes, now we are going to learn why, because our final guest today is going to explain the flexibilities available in our own procurement policies here at DHS that can help your procurement team carry out some parts of the acquisition process before funding is available. Donata, could you please introduce yourself, your organization, and your role here at DHS?
Good afternoon. Pleasure to be here. My name is Donata Sicon Amato. I'm a senior procurement analyst in the Office of the Chief Procurement Officer, Acquisition Policy and Legislation Division, known as APL. In APL, we issue department-wide acquisition policy that includes the Homeland Security Acquisition Regulation, HSAR, Homeland Security Acquisition Manual, HSAM, acquisition alerts, deviations, guides, job aids, and templates. We also provide training on various topics to the acquisition workforce. My assigned FAR parts are 6, 10, and 42, and I'm very passionate about these FAR parts and corresponding HSAM parts.
Thank you, Donata, and thank you for being here today. Well, we're going to start out with a scenario that we commonly see, especially when some teams engage with the PIL. Here we have our CO, Anita. She is in a situation where she has not received a funded PR, but she has received all of the other PR package documents, the statement of work, the IGCE, market research, and she's wondering, well, without a funded PR, what can I do? I would say that if we were playing that famous board game, I know I would just probably mortgage some properties, but I don't think that's available to us, is it, Donata?
If Anita, our contracting officer, received all other PR package documents, but not the funded PR, there's a lot she can do. Actually, HSAM 3032.702-71, procurement request prior to availability of funds, stresses that FAR does not prohibit a contracting officer from initiating action in response to a procurement request in advance of receipt of certified funds. However, the contracting officer should initiate award action only if there's a reasonable expectation that funds will be committed and certified.
Now that's interesting. So there isn't anything prohibiting a contracting officer from still going ahead and doing something with that PR package and those documents. So now that we know that's what the regulation said, and for those of you who are new to DHS, or maybe you're just new to procurement, the HSAM is the Homeland Security Acquisition Manual, and it's the department-wide acquisition policy and procedures to implement, our supplements to the FAR and to the Homeland Security Acquisition regulations. But now that we've heard that this is allowable, we're going to go over to an exercise, because I would really like to hear from our audience if the contracting officer is able to now work on some of these PR package documents. Can you let us know in the chat, what are some things she can do specifically? Like, what does that mean to you that a CO could do? Well, while you are thinking, I see market research. She can review the market research. She can even give advice on the market research. Absolutely. Oh, I see someone mention the acquisition plan. Yep, release an RFI. That would help. Yes. Oh, here we go. Sources sought for market research. I like that. Oh, Tamika's thinking ahead. Maybe some higher level reviews can go ahead and happen in the contract officer's review chain. Oh, I like that one. Review the set statement of work. Absolutely. I see a few folks are saying release the RFQ. We'll get to that in a second. We'll put a pin in it, if you will. I like this. Send out the RFI, a lot of market research assistance. Oh, I like that.
Romeo said everything up to the solicitation.
Oh, everything up to, so everything, I like that. So maybe a draft solicitation for sure. Maybe go on and get that through your review process. All right, you know what? I like it. These are all great ideas. Donata, how did our audience do today? What do you think?
Great job. I see a lot of documents that I'm going to mention now because all provided documents can be reviewed for completeness, accuracy, and quality. Contracting officers can advise on some additional market research efforts to solidify or expand the market research, as some participants stated. They can point the program officials into the right direction in terms of what to add or how to revise the documents, what else is still required. There may be a situation where a particular document needs an approval beyond the contracting officer, so it can be reviewed to make sure it's ready to proceed with other approvals. An acquisition plan is a good example of this situation because the acquisition plan must be finalized and approved prior to the solicitation posting. Contracting officers can also start discussing the program specifics related to the evaluation factors and strategy. The focus should be to finalize all documents that are required within the procurement package, so the contracting officer can proceed to draft a solicitation.
Oh, well done. And well done to our participants today. Now, Donata, what's in it for the CO, though? I mean, is there really any benefit to a contracting officer to start working on any of these documents before there's an actual funded PR?
Of course, there are benefits. This may be beneficial for all stakeholders and lead to a win-win situation with program officials working on the right documentation and clearly understanding timelines, and contracting officers not rushing with incomplete documentation late in the fiscal year. Additionally, it may impact the contracting officer's review chain as it spreads all work across the fiscal year instead of putting more pressure in quarters 3 and 4.
Very good. So just to clarify for our audience, it's not that the contracting officer is creating these documents. She's been given the documents. What she's taking advantage of is just starting the review process, sending things to the review chain, maybe giving some advice to her program office customer over to Steve there on things he can do to improve the documents. She's drafting a solicitation. Those are all the things that are in her swim lane. So she's not creating the PR package documents. She's just moving ahead with the procurement as if she had funding. But remember, she doesn't have funding yet. And I appreciate, Donata, what the benefits could be. I'd like to know out there, are any of you actually doing this? Are any contracting officers out there, or if your PM is your contracting officer, reviewing and processing PR package documents before they even have funding? I'd love to hear from you in the chat. And for those of you who are new to DHS or new to the acquisition workforce, if you're wondering what does need to be in a PR package, take a look at HSAM 3004.71. The link to that is in the bottom left-hand side of this slide. And if you do hover over it, you are able to go to that link. All right. Now, if we can go one more slide, advance to the next slide, we're still at the same HSAM reference. But, on the famous board game, when you land on the question mark and you read that little orange card, it's really important to read the orange card in its entirety. Who remembers the one that says, do not pass go and do not collect $200, right? So in this instance, it's probably a good idea to read this section of the HSAM in full. And Tracy, can you tell us what this last little sentence in the HSAM says?
Absolutely. So it says to see HSAM 3032.71 703-70 for policy on release of a solicitation prior to funds being provided.
Interesting. So what I'm seeing here, Donata, tell me if I'm wrong, it looks like even without a funded PR, we could release a solicitation. Is that right?
Sandra, yes, but let's slow down. Let's read the regulation first to understand the rules and the limitations.
Okay, fair enough, fair enough. What does it say?
HSAM 3032.703-70 states that the Federal Acquisition Regulation does not prohibit release of a solicitation before funds are made available. A solicitation may be released prior to funds being provided only if there is a reasonable expectation that the requirement will be funded prior to award and the procedures of paragraph B are satisfied.
Oh, brilliant. So as long as Anita, the CEO, is confident that, before I make an award, funds will show up then. They'll show up just in time. It is A-okay for her to release that solicitation. Is that what I'm hearing?
Sandra, wait.
I need to slow down again?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm guessing we probably should read in full what paragraph B says, huh? There's probably some exceptions in there.
Yes, paragraph B of this HSAM section is very important.
All right. Well, we've moved on to see what the rest of this section says. So now we're in paragraph B. These are procedures. It says a solicitation may be released before funds are committed for the action if, and we're going to have three things we're going to review here. So Donata, what is the first thing that needs to happen for Anita, the CEO, to release that solicitation without a funded PR?
Yes, there's three conditions that need to be satisfied. So let's read first one. It's very important. Based on information provided by the component, the contracting officer determines in writing the resulting action is expected to be funded prior to award, and the program requirement has been included in the president's budget as submitted to Congress.
All right, that seems easy enough. Okay. Here's the second thing that has to happen. The solicitation clearly places offers on notice that there are currently no funds for the solicitation requirement, and a contractor order can be awarded only if funds become available. It's probably a good idea we let vendors know that even if we put a solicitation out, we don't have money. So
We
yeah.
gotta be good partners with them, right?
Yeah, well, remember, they are part of the acquisition team, which we just learned when we had our Fire Part 1 quote of the month earlier today. Good point, good point. Now, Donata, what is the third condition that would allow Anita, the CEO, to release this solicitation without funding?
The third and very important one, for requirements exceeding to $1 million, the program manager or program representative at the 06 GS15 level or above provides the contracting officer a written statement that funds are expected to be available for the proposed acquisition, and the statement is approved by the appropriate component finance office.
Oh, so special requirements for those procurements over $1 million. I would like to ask our audience, if you could let us know in the chat, how many of you have been part of a procurement team where the flexible procedures here have been used, where the contracting officer agreed to release the solicitation without a funded PR? We'd love to hear those answers in the chat. I'm seeing it's roughly 50-50. Okay.
I'd love to know if those people who did, whether it was over $1 million or under $1 million.
Yeah, I'm also curious, what type of mission was your team trying to meet in situations where your CEO released a solicitation first? We were actually wondering this yesterday. What type of mission need? Oh, I'm seeing some support services in here. Keep those coming in the chat. We'd love to know what would fit this scenario.
Advertising.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Interesting. But look, I see a fair number under $1 million. Oh, housing. You know what? I could see a FEMA mission.
Yeah,
absolutely. Sure. That makes a lot of sense. Okay. First responder lodging. Yeah. Oh, transportation security equipment. Good point. Security related.
COVID prep.
Oh,
definitely.
That's another good one. Interesting. Okay. Well, it's fantastic seeing that some of you are already using this tool and this flexibility. And for those of you with the appropriate type of mission you're supporting, we just want you to know this is here and it's available to you. But Donata, do you have any takeaways for our audience if they're going to consider using this flexibility in the HSAM?
Yes. The key here is that program officials and contracting officers are communicating and understand the specific procurement they are working on and its impact to the mission. It's also crucial that contracting officers pay close attention to how their local component procurement policy may supplement these HSAM procedures.
All right, brilliant. We're going to now move on to slide number 38. Now, since we learned earlier some of the reasons for why PRs show up, or the funded PRs don't show up until the fourth quarter, knowing why, okay, maybe the contracting officer can have a little bit of more empathy for Steve, our program manager, but all the same, there's less than 3 months to get this thing awarded. What can she do?
Well, if it's a competitive procurement, she can reach out to the PIL for formal coaching support to innovate the procurement process using a technique like on-the-spot consensus, confidence ratings, advisory down select, but there are many other resources available.
Good point. Perhaps you would also like to watch one of our past PIL webinars. We have 75 webinar recordings available on our DHS Connect site, and she could get a sense of what some other contracting officers at DHS have done to make their awards a little more quickly.
That's true, and if she doesn't have time to watch a whole webinar, then she should watch a PILcast, each of which is less than 10 minutes. We guarantee it.
Have any of you watched the PILcast lately? Let us know in the chat. And if you have not yet subscribed to our YouTube channel, just hover over the little PILcast logo there, and it'll take you right to YouTube so that you can subscribe. Maybe she would like to join the Procurement Innovation Neighborhood. That's the second Wednesday of every month. Scott shared everything there is to know about that one earlier.
She could also reach out to a PIL DigiBadge holder. There's nearly 3,000 DigiBadge holders across DHS who have attended a PIL bootcamp and who have been innovating the procurement process for quite some time. Anita can certainly reach out to one of her colleagues.
Some of the more advanced DigiBadge holders, they're acquisition innovation advocates at each of the components. Every component has one. So if you'd like to know who your acquisition innovation advocate is and you'd like some assistance, reach out to the PIL. We're happy to share that person's name, and they are more than happy to help you. Now, we have one final slide. We've been receiving questions about it all day. What about continuing resolutions? I know this is a headache for Steve, the PM. It can be a bit of a headache for Anita, the contracting officer. We know what CRs are. We know that we're currently right now operating on funding at the same level of FY23. Donata, I understand your office has released a brand new resource this month. Could you please tell our audience what that is?
Yes, we have a fantastic resource. Just recently in March, APL issued an acquisition alert 24-08 with the continuing resolution job aid. It's a very helpful 6-pager explaining on a high level this complex topic. The job aid provides an overview of the budgetary process and history of continuing resolutions. It also provides information on incremental funding on fixed price, time and materials or labor hour contracts during the CR, and cites relevant HSAM subchapters and policies. HSAM 3032.7, contract funding, with specific policy in 3032.702.
Thank you, Donata. Now, for those of you in the audience who have been asking CR questions today, it's not that we've been ignoring you, it's that we don't quite have time to address your specific issues, but there is a place that you can go. Donata, where can these folks go if they have questions right now, today, about how to fund their contracts during a CR?
First, the folks should go to their local component policy leads, and then they can reach out to us, APL, at acquisition.policy@hq.dhs.gov. They can also check our DHS Connect site that includes job aids and other helpful resources.
Brilliant. Now to get to their website, we have the link there on the page. It's also in the PIL links box. You have 3 resources now. You can go check out that guide, reach out to your local component policy lead. You can reach out to Donata's team specifically. And bonus, our downloads box contains some extra documentation from Donata's team that you all are welcome to download to use for your continuing resolution actions. All right, and with that, I think I'm turning it back over. Oh, sorry, I forgot. Final thoughts, Donata. What are your final thoughts for our audience today?
Thank you, Sandra. My final thoughts. As always, communication is a key. I recommend contracting officers and contract specialists have open communication with their program offices. Also, that they are not afraid to talk and reach out for advice and guidance during the acquisition process to their leadership and local component policy leads. You are not alone in this process. Acquisition is a team effort. Thank you very much for inviting me today.
All right, thank you, Donata.
All right, so just as a reminder, we have a survey. It should be popping up on your screen now, or there is a link at the bottom of the screen.
You can actually just click right here on this PowerPoint slide and it'll take you right there as well. And don't forget, as we talked about earlier, we've got the PIN neighborhood coming up, the Procurement Innovation Neighborhood. That is the second Wednesday of every month. So come and join us for a great discussion. You can visit that on our website. There's also a hot link here to send us an email. I just clicked it by accident. On our next slide, you've got lots and lots of resources there. I heard earlier that a lot of folks haven't watched our PILcast series yet. So if you'd like to watch our PILcast series, I think that you can find a link here. We've also got recordings to those 75 different webinars, 76 as of tomorrow, as lots of all those other resources, including the AIA component representatives that Sandra mentioned earlier. So go and check that out when you've got a chance. The FY23 PIL yearbook is now available, Building a Community of Procurement Innovation. This is a great yearbook. It's about 20 pages, and it's got some really fantastic stories in there from all of the components. And so you can go to our PIL webpage to find that. You can also share that externally because that is publicly available. This is submitted to Congress every year.
Yeah, I highly recommend everyone open that and check it out because whether you realize it or not, you may be featured in this year's FY23 PIL yearbook because we actually featured some of our the folks who attended the most number of webinars last year. So check it out. Your name might be in there without you even realizing it. On top of that, your colleagues did some really neat things last year when it came to innovating the procurement process. You want to check out their stories as well.
Definitely a great thing to read. We've also got some upcoming training. So if you haven't taken one of our boot camps, please consider joining us. We've got 2 boot camps coming up, April 16th and May 9th. One of them is in the morning and one of them is in the afternoon. So earlier today, I saw someone out there from Hawaii. If you are not a morning person on the East Coast, then you please feel free to join us in the afternoon, which might be a little better for you. Now, if you've already taken the PIL Bootcamp and you want to take something a little more advanced, consider taking PIL Bootcamp, the next level. It's got a lot of interactive techniques as well as more innovative procurement techniques for you. We've got that course on April 18th and May 7th. And finally, if you're interested in coaching teams or just want to know what does a coach do, come and join us for our coaching clinic. We have that on April 25th. The PILcast series.
PILcast, yes. So if those of you who, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. We have PILcasts, which are videos of 10 minutes or less that discuss very specific innovative procurement topics. A lot of us go to YouTube when we need to fix something in our house. Why not go there too when you have a question about procurement innovation? So we're here to deliver. We are about to release some PILcasts that talk about how to use an electronic form to streamline requests for information responses. We're also going to have a PILcast talking about some of the content that's inside the PIL yearbook. So be sure to subscribe and check out those short videos.
And our PILcasts are always really fun too. We did a holiday edition one this year with some trivia.
And then there's one from a few previous years ago where there was, in fact, singing, Scott.
There's at least 2 out there with singing because we did the singing holiday one and I did the ukulele one last year. So if you really wanted singing today.
There are 2 videos of Scott singing.
I don't know if that's going to... Wait, it wasn't just me singing the first time though. We all
But the second time, it was definitely you singing. So if anyone wants to hear Scott sing, check out the PILcast. And you know what? For the record, he did do a good job.
Yeah, I don't know if my singing is going to drive people towards PILcast or away, but I do see a question out there from Daryl. Is your April 16th PIL Bootcamp full? No, Daryl, it's not.
Nope.
Go ahead and sign up.
Yeah, we thank our partners at the Homeland Security Acquisition Institute. They've helped us secure some really, really large rooms using Zoom. So if you haven't signed up yet or your colleagues haven't signed up yet, please be sure to take advantage of that.
All right. We've also got the PIL Idea Competition out there. Sandra, anything to pitch about the PIL Idea Competition?
Yeah, so we recently had an award, some winners over at Customs and Border Protection. They are over there. They created a bot to streamline their congressional notification process. Flexi currently has an active competition where they're in prototyping ideas. So if there's a process out there in your procurement offices that you wish that, we could really use an opportunity to crowdsource to try to improve, please reach out to the PIL.
If you haven't been to if you've been to a bunch of webinars and you've got a DigiBadge, submit your application. If you've got if attended your PIL Bootcamp, you've already got this, and you can display that so that you know and everyone else knows you are part of the innovation community. You can request PIL coaching support on our webpage by clicking on the one-pager, and a coach will get in touch with you. You can get FAI courses that touch on these subjects If you want to get additional certifications for your FACT Core, FACT PM, and of course we offer 1.5 CLPs for all of our webinars. We've got brand new location for the periodic table of acquisition innovations. So if you've got the PTAI bookmarked, make sure to check your bookmark. Go to this new link. It's on the acquisition gateway. Very important. All of the same information, just a new location. So update your bookmark from there and make sure you get it. We want to thank you all for joining us today, and we will see you next time. I'm going to go get my peanut butter sandwich now.